My mother's diary fell into my hands, and from that moment, nothing was ever the same. I always knew my mother, Margaret Evans, didn't love me the same way she loved my older brother, Michael. But I never imagined the difference was so brutal until that rainy day in March 2023, when by pure accident, her diary literally fell into my hands. My name is Emily Evans, I'm 28 years old, and I grew up carrying the heavy weight of being the forgotten daughter. I spent my childhood in a tiny, cramped house in Queens, New York, where every detail of that home made it painfully clear how much more my mother cared for my brother. His room was up front with a big window looking out onto the street. Mine? A tiny box in the back, barely ventilated, where the sound of rain hitting the metal roof became the soundtrack to my sleepless nights. Michael always had everything. Every Christmas, he got a brand new bike, while I received hand-me-down clothes from the church. When it was time to apply for college, my mom sold Grandma Evelyn's wedding rings to pay for his prep course. And me? You'll have to figure it out, Emily. Life's not easy for anyone. Those words tore through me every single time she said them. Michael graduated from MIT, fully supported by her. Today, he works for a multinational, lives in a Manhattan high-rise, and drives a brand new Tesla. And me? I graduated in education. From a community college, paying for every single class with my own sweat, waiting tables at night, and tutoring kids on weekends. Every diploma I earned was soaked in exhaustion, struggle, and tears. The difference between us was so obvious that even the neighbors noticed. Mrs. Jenkins, who lived next door, would sometimes call me over and quietly say, "Sweetheart, I never understood your mother. You're so smart, so hardworking." Why? Can't she see that? I'd just smile and change the subject, but inside, my heart was breaking. Because even a child could see what my own mother refused to acknowledge. I'll never forget my 15th birthday. Just 3 months earlier, Michael had a huge high school graduation party. Rented venue, DJ, full catering, over 100 guests. And for me, my mom bought a grocery store cake and said, "Call a couple of friends. We'll do something simple here at home." There was no party, just me, sitting in my little back room, staring out of that tiny window, wondering what was so wrong with me. And then came that day. My mom had a hypertensive crisis and was rushed to the hospital. And guess who went running to be by her side? Me, because Michael was in an important meeting and couldn't leave. While she was recovering, I stayed at her house organizing documents for the health insurance. I was rummaging through her closet when I felt something hard under the mattress. I pulled it out. It was a brown leather diary, old and worn. On the first page, written in her neat handwriting, "Personal Diary of Margaret Evans, 1994. My heart started racing. I shouldn't read it. It was an invasion. But my hands were shaking as I held what might finally give me the answers I had been searching for my entire life. Why didn't she love me? What was so wrong with me? I opened to the first page. First, it was just mundane notes. Complaints about her job at the supermarket, comments about the neighbors, grocery lists. But then I reached an entry dated September 15th, 1994. Michael turned 3 today. What a beautiful, smart, loving boy. He's just like his father. His eyes, his smile, even the way he talks. When I look at him, it's like Daniel is still here with me. My precious boy. My reason to live. Daniel was my father. He died in a motorcycle accident when I was just 2 years old, and Michael was 5. I kept reading, desperately searching for something about me, and then I found it, in a December entry, that same year. Emily is growing up so fast. She's so different from her brother. Sometimes I'm even afraid to look at her. She reminds me of those terrible times when Daniel started drinking and hitting me. She has his eyes when he was drunk, dark, too intense. It gives me chills. My world shattered. I read that sentence over and over, unable to believe it. She was afraid of me because I reminded her of my father at his worst. I kept flipping through the pages, and every single line revealed a truth she had hidden from me for almost 3 decades. And in that moment, everything finally made sense, and nothing would ever be the same again. January 1995. Emily has started talking more. She said, "Mommy," yesterday. But hearing her voice felt like hearing Daniel call me on those terrible nights. I can't respond with love. I just nod and walk away. March 1995. Michael won first place at the school science fair. I'm so proud. He's perfect. My golden boy. Emily participated too, but I didn't go. I just can't stand looking at that little face that reminds me so much of her father at his worst. Every page was another stab straight into my chest. Years and years of documented, systematic rejection. Every moment she had chosen to ignore my achievements. Every time she invested in Michael and left me behind. It was all there, written in her own handwriting. June 1998. Emily got straight A's this semester. Her teacher called to congratulate me. I should feel happy. But all I can think is how stubborn she is, just like her father. Daniel was smart too, when he wanted to be. But he used his intelligence to hurt me. I'm scared she'll grow up the same way. December 2001. Michael got accepted into the private school we wanted. I'll be able to pay his tuition by picking up extra shifts on weekends. Emily asked to apply too, but I told her we don't have the money. The truth is, I don't want her going to the same school as him. He deserves his own space, somewhere far from the bad memories she brings me. My tears smeared the ink as I read. 28 years of my life suddenly made perfect, devastating sense. It was never about me not being good enough. It wasn't because I did anything wrong. It was because she couldn't separate my face from the traumatic memories of my father. But the entry that shattered me the most was from May 2010, when I had just graduated high school. Emily graduated today. She was valedictorian, gave the graduation speech, got the highest grades in her class. All the teachers came to shake my hand, telling me how special she is, how hardworking, how bright her future is. I smiled. I said thank you. But inside, I was panicking. She's becoming strong, determined, just like Daniel was before he turned into a monster. What if she inherited not just his intelligence, but his cruelty? What if one day she decides to make me pay for all these years, all the years I couldn't love her the way I should have? I closed the diary and collapsed on her bedroom floor. I cried like I had never cried before. Decades of pain. Decades of rejection. Of feeling like I wasn't enough. Of questioning my own worth. And all of it. Because of her. Because of a wound she never had the courage to heal. She had punished an innocent child for the sins of a man who'd been dead for years. But along with the pain, something else began to rise. Anger. A clean, righteous, fire-burning anger. She had stolen my childhood, my teenage years, my self-esteem. She had denied me the mother's love that was supposed to be my birthright. She had condemned me to a lifetime of believing I was unworthy. Right there, still on my knees next to her bed, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to make her see the magnitude of the injustice she had committed. I was going to build a life so extraordinary, so undeniably successful, that she would be forced to acknowledge that she spent decades punishing the wrong person. I stood up, wiped my tears, and looked out the window. Outside, the rain had stopped. A single beam of sunlight was breaking through the heavy clouds. It was like the universe itself was sending me a message. My real life was only just beginning. If this story is touching your heart, hit the like button and subscribe to the ICE channel so you don't miss the next chapters of this journey of resilience and triumph. I put the diary back exactly where I found it, and I walked out of that house with my heart on fire and a determination stronger than anything I had ever felt before. For 28 years, I had tried to earn my mother's love by being the perfect daughter, the good girl who never caused trouble. But now I knew the truth. No matter what I did, she could never love me, because I represented ghosts she refused to face. But if she couldn't see me for who I really was, the rest of the world would. And I was going to make damn sure of that. That night, I went back to my tiny one-bedroom apartment in the Bronx, a place I had managed to rent by working 16-hour days, teaching at the local school during the week and hustling side jobs on weekends. It was small. It was simple. but it was mine. Every piece of furniture inside that apartment was bought with my own money. Every victory, paid for with sweat and sacrifice. I sat down at my study desk, a wooden plank balanced on 2 crates I picked up at a hardware store, and I started to plan. If I was going to prove my worth to the world, I needed a real plan, not just dreams. First, I made a brutally honest list of my current situation. Salary as a preschool teacher, $560 a week, fixed expenses, rent, bills, food, $480, leftover $80. For emergencies and dreams, it wasn't much, not even close. But I had something money couldn't buy. A fire inside me, burning like molten lava, desperate to prove my worth. I remembered a conversation I'd had months earlier with Sandra, a parent from my class who worked in digital marketing. She had told me how she was making money creating online content for small businesses. "Emily," she'd said, "you have such a special way of explaining things. Have you ever thought about teaching online?" Back then, I had laughed. Who would want to learn from me? But now, with the truth about my mother still echoing in my mind, that idea no longer seemed ridiculous. I was good at what I did, really good. My students loved my classes. Parents were always praising my teaching style. I had a genuine passion for education that showed in everything I did. I spent the entire night researching online teaching, digital, platforms, course creation, content production. I discovered a whole world I never even knew existed. People were making thousands of dollars teaching everything from cooking to marketing, languages, crafts, music. Why not early childhood education? The next day, still bleary-eyed from reading all night, I called Sandra and asked to meet for coffee. When I shared my idea, she practically jumped out of her chair with excitement. "Emily, this is genius. You have no idea how many moms come to me desperate because they don't know how to help their kids learn at home, especially after the pandemic. Everyone realized they don't know how to teach their own children. You'd be a lifesaver." She offered to help me with the technical side in exchange for private tutoring for her daughter, who was struggling with math. It was a fair deal that wouldn't break my already tight budget. For the next 3 months, I worked like a woman possessed. Mornings teaching at school, afternoons building the online course, nights learning about filming, editing, and digital platforms. My weekends turned into filming marathons in my tiny apartment, turning my living room into an improvised studio with white sheets as a backdrop and sunlight from the window as my only lighting. My mother had been discharged from the hospital by then and would occasionally call to complain that I wasn't visiting. "You've been awfully busy, Emily. I hope you're not getting yourself into something stupid." I would simply reply that I was working on some important projects, never going into details. The truth was, every time I heard her voice, the words from her diary echoed in my mind like a funeral bell. Michael, of course, continued being the perfect son, the one who visited her religiously every Sunday, bringing flowers and fancy chocolates. I would hear about it from her passive-aggressive comments. "Your brother brought me the most beautiful roses yesterday. He's so thoughtful." But I was too busy building my future to care about any of that anymore. In June 2023, I launched my first online course, Fun with Literacy: How to Teach Your Child at Home. It was a series of 20 practical lessons filled with creative activities, educational games, and methods I had developed over 8 years of teaching. The price? $59. I figured if I sold 10 courses a month, I could double my income. A modest dream, but one that represented the first step toward total independence. The first week, a disaster. 0 sales. The second week? Same. I started doubting myself when Sandra suggested something. "Emily, you need to do some free Instagram lives to show people what you can do. Let them see that you actually know your stuff." The thought terrified me. Talking to a camera was already hard enough. Doing it live? But then, the memory of my mother's diary hit me like a punch to the gut. How many times had I held myself back because I was afraid I wasn't good enough? How many opportunities had I let slip away because I believed I didn't deserve success? I scheduled my first live for Thursday at 8 p.m. The topic? 5 simple games that teach math to kids ages 4 to 7. I spent the entire week rehearsing, scripting every word, preparing visual materials. When the time came, I was shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. I started the live with just 3 people watching, probably Sandra and 2 friends she'd dragged along. But as I started explaining the activities, showing how to use household items to teach math concepts, something magical happened. I forgot about the camera. I became myself again, the passionate teacher who loves what she does. By the end of that 1-hour live, 43 people were watching. More. Importantly, 17 of them were asking questions, requesting tips, and praising the way I explained things. A mom named Fernanda even commented, "Teacher, you explain things so clearly. My son has ADHD and I've never been able to help him with math. I'm definitely trying these activities." The next morning, I woke up to 15 private messages from people interested in my course. I sold 7 courses that week. It wasn't huge in absolute numbers, but it meant nearly $400, more than half of my teaching salary. More important than the money was the feeling that, for the first time, I was finally on the right path. These people didn't see me as the daughter who reminds her mother of the abusive father. They saw me as a competent teacher, as someone who had real value to offer. I kept doing weekly lives, and every week more and more people showed up. My Instagram, which had started with 80 followers, mostly family and coworkers, began to grow. 100, 200, 500 followers, and with that, the sales grew too. In August, I sold 42 courses. In September, 67. Then came October, the turning point. 103 courses sold, over $6,000 in gross revenue. After taxes and platform fees, I cleared almost $4,500, more than 10 times my monthly teaching salary. That's when I made a decision that many people around me called insane. I quit my job at the school. My principal was shocked. "Emily, you're one of our best teachers. Are you sure you want to leave a stable job for this internet uncertainty?" But I didn't see it as uncertainty. I saw it as freedom. Freedom to create, freedom to innovate. Freedom to be recognized for my real talents without being trapped in hierarchies or office politics. For the first time in my life, my success depended solely on me. In November, I launched my second course, Supporting Learning Challenges, a practical guide for parents and educators. Price, $99. It was based on my years of experience with special needs children and inspired by comments like Fernanda's about her son with ADHD. The response blew past even my wildest expectations. In just 2 weeks, over 200 people had purchased the course. My monthly income skyrocketed from $4,500 to nearly $9,000. That's when I got the phone call that would change everything. It was from a television production company in New York. They had found my profile on Instagram and wanted to invite me to be a guest on a PBS show about education. "Ms. Evans, your work in online education really caught our attention. We'd love to feature you as one of the experts in our segment on early childhood literacy." I hung up the phone in disbelief. TV? Me? The same person who, just 3 months earlier, was shaking just to go live for 40 people? But the biggest surprise came the very next day. A message popped up in my Instagram DMs that made my heart race. "Hi, Emily. I'm a journalist with Parents Magazine. We're working on a feature about the new wave of digital educators revolutionizing learning in the US. Your name came up several times. Would you be open to an interview?" It felt surreal. In less than 6 months, I had gone from being completely invisible to being recognized as a leader in my field. And the best part? It was happening on my terms, in my own time, with my talent finally seen for what it truly was. That night, I stood in front of the mirror in my small, but now much more comfortable apartment. The woman staring back at me wasn't the girl haunted by the ghosts of maternal rejection. She was a confident professional, a successful entrepreneur, someone who had finally found her true calling. For the first time in 28 years, I felt whole, and this was only the beginning. January 2024 arrived with a force of transformation I never could have imagined. The PBS appearance opened doors I didn't even know existed. And the Parents Magazine article, which came out on the December cover under the title, "The Teacher," who became a digital phenomenon, catapulted my career to an entirely new level. My Instagram grew from 2,000 to 15,000 followers in just 2 months. But more important than the numbers was the quality of the community. Moms from all over the country were sharing their stories. Teachers were asking for tips, other content. Creators were reaching out for collaborations. But what touched me most were the private messages that came flooding in every single day. Ms. Emily, my son used to be terrified of math. Now he asks me to play the games you taught during your live. I realized my daughter had dyslexia after watching your live about warning signs. She's now getting help and improving so much. I've been a teacher for 20 years, and your techniques have completely transformed my classroom. Thank you for sharing so much knowledge. Every message like that was a balm for the old wound my mother's diary had ripped open. I was really making a difference in people's lives, not out of pity, not out of obligation, but because I had something truly valuable to offer. In February, I made a decision that even Sandra thought was crazy. I leased a professional studio in Brooklyn. It was a huge investment, $900 a month, but I needed a proper space to record high-quality content. Plus, I wanted a place where I could collaborate with other educators and host in-person workshops. The studio was on the 12th floor of a modern commercial building with sweeping views of the city and top-of-the-line equipment. As I signed the contract, the leasing agent made small talk. Wow, what an interesting project. You're really young to be running a business like this. I smiled and answered with a confidence that surprised even me. Age doesn't determine competence. What matters is passion and having something valuable to share. That same month, I launched my third course, Emotional Education in Early Childhood. This topic hit deeply personal for me. After all, I'd grown up without the emotional support every child deserves. I knew firsthand how that leaves lifelong marks. The course taught parents and educators how to help children identify, express, and process their emotions in healthy ways. How to create emotionally safe environments, how to validate feelings, and how to develop emotional intelligence from an early age. Price: $139. It was the highest priced course so far, but the content absolutely justified it. Over 40 lessons, printable support materials, tracking spreadsheets, and access to a private group where I personally answered questions. In 3 weeks, I sold over 400 enrollments, nearly $56,000 in gross revenue. Even after taxes, expenses, and platform fees, my net income had soared past $16,000 a month. That was when the speaking invitations started rolling in. Schools, universities, education conferences. The first one was at NYU during a symposium on educational innovation. As I stepped onto the stage in front of 300 people, my mind flashed back to that little girl crying in her tiny back room. The girl no one showed up for on her 15th birthday. The keynote was an absolute success. My topic, Humanized Digital Education, How Technology Can Strengthen Real-Life Connections, deeply moved the audience. At the end, a line formed, teachers, administrators, education leaders, all wanting to talk, exchange cards, and propose partnerships. One of the people in that line was Dr. Mariana Reed, Director of Early Childhood Education at the New York City Department of Education. She approached me with a proposal that made my heart race. Ms. Evans, we've been following your work and are truly impressed by your results. We'd like to propose an official partnership to train our network of preschool teachers. It would be a pilot project involving 100 public schools. It was massive. If successful, I'd be helping train over 2,000 teachers, impacting tens of thousands of children. And of course, it was the kind of official recognition no diploma could ever compete with. Meanwhile, my personal life was transforming just as quickly. I moved into a beautiful 3-bedroom apartment in Manhattan with a gorgeous view and an office where I could work in peace. I bought my first car, a hybrid Honda Civic. Ironically, the same model my brother drove, except mine was the newer, fully loaded version. But the biggest transformation wasn't material, it was internal. For the first time in my life, I looked in the mirror and saw a strong, accomplished woman who had built something extraordinary with her own 2 hands. The insecurities born from years of maternal rejection were still there, but now they were just distant whispers, drowned out by the growing chorus of professional respect. Then, in April, something happened that made it impossible for my family to ignore my transformation. I was being interviewed live on Good Morning America, on a segment about the impact of digital education on child development. It was 10 a.m. on a Monday, the exact time I knew my mother always watched TV while drinking her long, slow morning coffee. For 20 minutes, I shared my journey, my methods, and the results I'd achieved. The host introduced me as one of the most innovative educators in the country, and remarked on how impressive it was for someone so young to have impacted so many families. My phone exploded during and after the interview. Hundreds of messages on Instagram, WhatsApp, buzzing nonstop. Emails with new opportunities pouring in by the minute. But the 3 calls I was secretly hoping for never came. Not from my mother, not from my brother, not even from Aunt Marlene, the family's lifelong gossip. The silence said more than words ever could. 2 weeks later, I found out by accident, through a comment from Sandra, that my mother had watched the interview. More than that, she had recorded it on her phone and showed it to some neighbors, proudly bragging, "That young woman on TV, that's my daughter." The irony was almost comical. The same woman who had spent decades treating me like a stranger now felt proud to show me off, when it was from a distance, when she didn't have to look me in the eye. Then, in May, I received the invitation that felt like the crowning moment of it all, to be the keynote speaker at the National Early Childhood Education Conference, the biggest event in the field. 3,000 attendees in person, over 10,000 watching online, full media coverage. The title of my speech, Redefining Education, Turning Personal Pain into Professional Purpose. For the first time, I would publicly speak about how my difficult childhood experiences had fueled my passion for creating emotionally safe learning environments. I wouldn't mention names, I wouldn't reveal specific family details, but I would talk about how children who grow up feeling invisible in their own homes often become the kind of adults who are fiercely empathetic and deeply committed to making sure no child ever feels unseen again. It was my way of turning personal pain into a universal purpose, something that could help other educators realize their wounds could become their greatest sources of strength. As I was preparing that talk, something unexpected happened. My Aunt Marlene called me. The first call from any family member since my life had skyrocketed. "Emily, sweetheart, I need to talk to you." Her voice sounded strange, hesitant. "Your mom, she's been acting different ever since she saw you on TV. She hasn't stopped talking about it, but she's scared to call you." I stayed silent, letting the words sink in. "She asked me for your new address, said she wants to visit, but she's afraid you won't want to see her. Emily, I know things have been rough between you two, but she's your mother, and she's getting older, you know." Ah, there. It was. The family's classic emotional playbook. Every time someone had to face the consequences of their own actions, suddenly it became about age, frailty, about, "But we're family." But I wasn't that little girl anymore. The one who begged for scraps of affection, the one who swallowed every ounce of rejection just to feel seen. "Aunt Marlene," I replied calmly. "My mom has had my phone number for years. If she wants to talk to me, she knows exactly how to reach me. She doesn't need a middleman. But she's embarrassed, honey. She thinks you might still be upset. And shouldn't I be?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "Aunt Marlene, with all due respect, this conversation is between me and her. When she's ready to have it, she'll know where to find me." I hung up, kindly but firmly. No drama, no cruelty, just boundaries. Healthy boundaries. Something that had taken me 28 years to learn how to set. The National Early Childhood Education Conference took place in June at the Javits Center in New York. When I walked into the main auditorium and saw 3,000 people waiting to hear me speak, I felt a wave of gratitude and nerves that almost brought me to tears. My keynote lasted 50 minutes and was interrupted 7 times by spontaneous applause. When it ended, the standing ovation lasted nearly 3 minutes. But the most emotional moment came during the Q&A when a teacher from Atlanta stood up and said, "Ms. Evans, your story touched me deeply. I was also one of those invisible kids at home, and I know exactly how much that shapes a person. Thank you." for turning your pain into healing for so many others. You are truly an inspiration. That night, back at the hotel, I received a message that would change everything. It was from a producer at 60 Minutes. Ms. Evans, we watched your keynote at the conference and were incredibly moved. We'd like to feature your story in a special segment on how digital education is transforming lives in America. It would be a 20-minute feature on our Sunday broadcast. Would you be interested? 60 Minutes. The most watched news program in the country. It was impossible that my family wouldn't see it. Impossible for anyone, anywhere to ignore it. I said yes immediately. The filming was scheduled for July. They planned to shoot at my studio, at a few partner schools, and interview some moms whose lives had been transformed by my courses. It was a full feature, not just about my professional success, but about the real impact my work was having on people's lives. Meanwhile, my company, which I had officially named the Emily Evans Institute of Education, continued to grow exponentially. I hired a team of 5, 2 educational assistants, a video editor, an administrative assistant, and a digital marketing specialist. My monthly income had stabilized around $24,000 after taxes, but more important than the money was the legacy I was building. Over 8,000 families had already taken my courses. Hundreds of teachers were applying my techniques in their classrooms. The pilot program with the New York City Department of Education had been so successful that other cities started reaching out, wanting to replicate the model. Then in August, something happened that sealed my transformation from the forgotten daughter to a national reference. I received an official email from the U.S. Department of Education. Dear Ms. Emily Evans, it is with great pleasure that we inform you of your nomination to join the National Advisory Council on Educational Innovation at the U.S. Department of Education. Your contributions to digital education and your innovative teaching methodologies have been recognized as vital to the future of education in our country. The induction ceremony will take place in Washington, D.C. at the department's headquarters, with the presence of the Secretary of Education and other distinguished officials. We look forward to your confirmation. Reading that email felt like being struck by lightning. Me, the girl who had grown up hearing that I wasn't worth the investment, was now being invited by the federal government to help shape the future of education in this country. The induction ceremony took place in September at the U.S. Department of Education's main hall in Washington, D.C. Wearing a navy blue blazer I had bought specifically for the occasion, I shook hands with the Secretary of Education while photographers captured the moment. In the official photo, published on the department's website and shared by countless media outlets, I stood smiling alongside 15 other experts. All of them held PhDs, international specializations, impressive academic resumes. And me, the girl from the tiny back room no one thought was worth investing in, was right there among them, entirely on my own merit. That night, back in New York, it finally happened. The moment I'd been waiting for. My phone rang, and the screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in over a year. Mom. My hand trembled slightly as I answered. Hello? Emily. It's me. Her voice sounded different, older, frailer, heavy with an emotion I couldn't quite place. I saw you on TV today, on the evening news, talking about your induction in Washington. I stayed silent, waiting. I'd like to talk to you, in person, if you'll allow me. The irony was deafening. Now that I no longer needed her approval, now that I had built a life and a legacy of my own, she finally wanted to talk. And yet, something deep inside me, maybe the little girl who had always dreamed of this moment, whispered, "Say yes." "We can meet next Saturday," I replied. "But it'll be at my office, and it will be an honest conversation, Mom. No half-truths." "I understand. I deserve that." I hung up knowing that the final chapter of this story was about to begin, and this time, she would be coming to me. Saturday arrived with a radiant September sun that seemed to pour directly into my office, a space that perfectly reflected my journey. Modern, warm, but highly professional. On the walls were framed diplomas, photos with education leaders, and shelves filled with books on pedagogy. In the center, a sleek conference table where I met with partners, educators, and officials. And it was right there that I would receive my mother for the first time in over a year. She arrived exactly at 10 a.m., wearing a blue dress I didn't recognize, clutching a small purse with both hands like it was some sort of shield. At 62, Margaret Evans looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair, once always perfectly styled, was now gray and thinner. But it was her eyes that caught me off guard for the first time in my life. She looked at me with something that resembled fear. "Hello, Mom. Please have a seat." My voice came out steadier than I expected. She sat down in the chair across from me, nervously scanning the room. This is beautiful, Emily. You've built something incredible." "I have." I went straight to the point, and I did it on my own. Silence filled the room for several long seconds. She fiddled nervously with the straps of her purse, clearly uncomfortable. I waited. I had spent my entire life waiting for this conversation. A few more minutes wouldn't hurt. "Emily, She started, then stopped. Took a deep breath and tried again. "I came here because I need to ask for your forgiveness, and I know I don't deserve it. But I need to try to explain some things." "Explain?" My voice carried a tone she recognized instantly. "Mom, I don't need explanations. I already have all the answers." She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" That's when I opened the drawer of my desk and pulled out the brown leather diary. The recognition in her eyes was instant and devastating. You read it?" Her voice was a strangled whisper. "Every page, every entry, every justification. You wrote for treating me like garbage my entire childhood." I placed the diary on the table between us. 28 years, Mom. 28 years wondering what was wrong with me. Why you couldn't love me the way you loved Michael. And the answer was right here. The entire time. She started crying. Not the dramatic, manipulative crying I had known when she wanted attention. No. This was different. Silent tears rolling down her face like rain against glass. "You punished me my whole life. For the sins of a dead man," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "You denied me love, support, attention, because I had the misfortune of reminding you of Dad. Not the good parts, the violent parts, as if I was responsible for his choices. As if a 2-year-old child could ever be to blame for anything. Emily, I was young. I was traumatized." She tried to explain, but I raised my hand to stop her. "No. You don't get to use trauma as an excuse. You know why? Because I carry trauma too. The trauma of growing up knowing that my own mother didn't love me. The trauma of spending my entire childhood trying to be good enough just to earn crumbs of the affection you handed to Michael without a second thought. And do you know what I did with my trauma?" I pointed to the walls around us, the diplomas, the photos, the awards. I turned it into purpose. Every child I help feel seen. Every parent I help build a healthier relationship with their kid. Every teacher who learns from me how to create emotionally safe classrooms. That all came from my pain. I took what you did to me, and I turned it into something that ensures no other child has to go through what I did. She was sobbing now, openly. I know I was a terrible mother to you. I know there's no excuse, but I regret it so much, Emily. So much. Sometimes I can't even sleep. When did this regret start, Mom? I asked, catching her, completely off guard. Was it when you first saw me on TV? When you realized I had made it despite everything? Because before that, you never showed a single ounce of remorse. She couldn't answer. And that silence was answer enough. Let me tell you something, I continued. For years, I dreamed of this moment. Dreamed of confronting you. Of making you admit what you did to me. But now that it's here, do you know what I feel? I stood up and walked toward the window, looking down at the city below. I feel pity. Pity for a woman who let her ghosts steal 28 years of a relationship with her own daughter. I turned back to face her. Do you know the difference between you and me, Mom? I chose to break the cycle. I could have become bitter. I could have spent my entire life blaming you for my failures. But I chose differently. When Dad died, you had two choices: heal your trauma or pass your pain onto an innocent child. You chose the second. I had the same choice with my pain, and I chose the first. How? She whispered, her voice cracking. How are you able to be so strong, so successful? After everything? It was a question I had asked myself 1,000 times over the past months. The answer had become crystal clear as I prepared my keynote about turning pain into purpose. Because I learned something fundamental. My worth doesn't depend on the love you couldn't give me. I built my own source of validation. Every life I touch, every child who grows more confident because of my work, every family that becomes stronger thanks to what I teach. That gives me a purpose bigger than anyone's approval. I sat back down. But this time, I pulled my chair next to hers, no longer divided by the desk. Mom, do you want to know the hardest truth of all? I said quietly. I forgive you. She looked at me, as if she didn't understand. I forgive you because carrying anger would give you a power over me that you no longer deserve. I forgive you because hurt people, and you were clearly deeply hurt. I forgive you because forgiveness is a gift I give to myself, not to you. But that doesn't mean, I continued before she could speak, that we're going to have the kind of close mother-daughter relationship we never had. That time is gone. You lost the right to be my emotional anchor the moment you chose to see me as a burden instead of your daughter. But I can offer you something else: mutual respect. Between two adult women. She wiped her eyes with a tissue pulled from her purse. And what does that mean, practically speaking? It means you can publicly be proud of my success. I know you already do. It means we can meet from time to time, talk respectfully, maybe have lunch on special occasions. But it also means you need to respect my boundaries and accept that the Emily you once knew, she died the day I read your diary. The woman sitting in front of you now is someone you'll have to get to know from scratch. And Michael? She asked hesitantly. What about Michael? He will always be your golden child, as he's always been. The difference is that doesn't hurt me anymore. I have my own life, my own success, my own identity. I no longer need to compete for your attention. At that exact moment, my phone rang. A WhatsApp video call. The name on the screen: Dr. Mariana Reed, Department of Education. Excuse me, Mom. This is an important call about a national project, I answered. Dr. Reed, good afternoon. Emily, I hope I'm not disturbing your Saturday, but I had to call right away. We just got the official confirmation. The U.S. Department of Education has approved our project for national implementation. Your methods will be applied in over 5,000 public schools across the country. My heart started racing. Are you serious? 5,000 schools? Even more. The project has been funded at $3 million for the next 3 years. You will be the National Pedagogical Director. Emily, you are about to impact the education of over 2 million children in the United States. I hung up, completely stunned. 2 million children. The number was almost impossible to process. My mother had witnessed the entire conversation in silence. When I set the phone down, she whispered, 2 million children will have better education because of you. Yes. My voice was still, shaking with emotion. 2 million children who will grow up feeling seen, valued, capable. They'll have teachers who know how to create emotionally safe classrooms. They'll have the kind of childhood that I never had. She stayed silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, softer, more genuine. Emily, I lost my daughter. I lost 28 years of your life because of my fears, my unresolved traumas. I can't undo that, but I can spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the forgiveness you just gave me. Mom, I said, standing up. You don't have to earn forgiveness. Real forgiveness doesn't come with prerequisites, but if you truly want to do something, go to therapy. Get help. Work through your pain, not for me, for you. Because you deserve to live. Whatever time you have left in peace, not haunted by ghosts from 40 years ago. She nodded, standing as well. I will. And, Emily, may I hug you? It wasn't the desperate hug of a daughter begging for motherly approval. It was the conscious hug of a woman who had chosen to break cycles, heal wounds, and turn pain into purpose. Of course you can. The hug lasted only a few seconds, but it carried decades of unspoken words, missed opportunities, and finally, a new kind of peace. When she left, I stood alone in my office looking out the window. Outside, New York pulsed on with its usual rhythm, completely unaware of the tiny miracle of healing that had just happened inside that room. I picked up my phone and recorded a voice message for Sandra. San, you won't believe what happened today. My mom came here. We talked about everything. I showed her the diary. And you know what I realized? That I really did it. Not just the professional success. I broke the cycle. I turned all that pain into something bigger than myself. I paused for a moment, looking at the diary still sitting on my desk. And the best part? I just found out. I'm about to impact the education of 2 million children across the country. 2 million kids who will grow up feeling valued, who will have teachers emotionally prepared, who won't have to go through what I went through. My voice cracked slightly, overwhelmed with emotion. Do you know what this means? I said softly. It means that all those nights crying in that tiny back room, all those years feeling invisible, all that pain, it all had a purpose. Every tear I ever shed became light for other children. 3 months later, in December 2024, I received the Educator of the Year award from the National Association for Education. The ceremony was held at Carnegie Hall in New York City, with over 1,000 people in the audience. Among them, sitting in the third row, were my mother and my brother Michael, who had reached out after learning about my conversation with our mom. He apologized for being complicit in the way I was treated all those years. When I walked onto that stage to accept the award, I looked out into the crowd and saw hundreds of faces that represented the lives I had touched. Teachers applying my methods, parents who had transformed their relationships with their children, kids growing up more confident because of the work I'd done. In my speech, I spoke about how our greatest pain can become our greatest purpose, how wounds can become strength, how rejection can become revolution. I didn't name names, I didn't share personal details, but everyone who knew me understood exactly what I meant. Every child deserves to feel seen, valued, and loved exactly as they are, I concluded. And if you were a child who never felt that, know this. It does not define your worth. You can choose to break the cycle. You can choose to turn your pain into healing for others. You can choose to become the person you needed when you were little. The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. When I stepped off the stage, my mother was waiting for me backstage. She didn't say a word. She simply handed me a folded piece of paper. It was a page torn from a brand new diary, written in that same careful handwriting I'd known all my life. December 2024. Today, I watched my daughter Emily receive the Educator of the Year award. I watched her speak to 1,000 people about turning pain into purpose, about breaking cycles, about healing wounds. And I realized she wasn't just talking about education. She was talking about herself, about how she took all the pain I caused and turned it into light for millions of others. I lost my daughter because of my fear and my unresolved trauma. I can't undo that. But today, I gained something I never imagined possible. The overwhelming pride of seeing that despite me, she became the most extraordinary woman I have ever known. She broke the cycle I perpetuated. She chose to be the mother I never knew how to be. She saved not only herself, but millions of other children. And that is the greatest gift a mother could ever receive, even a mother who never deserved it. I folded the paper and slipped it into my pocket. I didn't say anything. I just smiled, gave her a quick hug, and walked toward the after party. Because this was my story now. No longer the rejected daughter chasing approval, but the woman who turned rejection into revolution. The woman who took the ashes of her childhood and built an empire of healing for others. My mother's diary had fallen into my hands to reveal the truth about my childhood. But even more importantly, it gave me the fuel to build a future where millions of other children would never have to go through what I did. And that, I realized, was far more powerful than any kind of maternal love I could have ever received. Did this story touch your heart? Hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more stories of resilience and transformation, proof that our greatest pain can become our greatest purpose.